In 2025, there were more than 1,500 cases of molestation reported in Singapore, with many taking place in spaces like on public transport and in nightclubs. That means more than 4 such cases every day. There were also 486 cases of voyeurism, which could include peeping toms and those taking upskirt videos. Now, it is an area that the police are concerned about, and they recently launched a campaign to encourage bystanders to report sexual crimes. But will this encourage people to actually report cases? And why do perpetrators still commit these crimes despite public warnings? Hi guys, I'm Natasha and welcome to another episode of The Usual Place, the podcast where we have real conversations about the headlines. Now, to help me understand both sides of the picture, I have on the podcast today 2 guests. My first guest is Dr Julia Lam, a consultant forensic psychologist who assesses people who have committed offences like sexual crimes. Now, Dr Julia, your area of interest, you have 2 areas of interest, which is impulse control disorder and behavioural addiction, among others. But these are the 2 areas that we're going to talk about today, right? So thank you for being here. And next to you on the couch, I have Lim Shoon Yin, the Executive Director of Singapore Women's Rights Group AWARE. And AWARE actually runs a sexual assault care centre for survivors of gender-based violence to provide, and this centre provides safe, free and confidential services for those who need it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So thank you for being here as well. So I want to start off this conversation by looking at the numbers. So outrage of modesty was one of the top crimes of concern for police in 2025. And while voyeurism cases have actually decreased slightly, there were still 486 cases reported last year. So I want to start with you, Shoon. Is AWARE seeing more people come forward to say, hey, I've been assaulted, I need help?
Definitely. Over time, we have seen that happen. For AWARE, when we first started, we had a women's helpline. And gradually over time, we recognized that more calls were coming in, particularly during the Me Too movement. When people became more aware, and we started receiving more calls around gender-based violence, and that was one of the reasons why we actually have a separate line from the general women's helpline for specifically dealing with sexual assault, and that allows us to provide more trauma-informed support for callers seeking information about what to do, what are their options, and how to go forward. And the numbers continue to be increasing. So just looking at the statistics that the police shared last year, where there was such a significant increase, like 7% increase in molestation, 20% in rape cases, that is a concern. Particularly as well because it was also noted that in many of these cases, the majority of the cases, the perpetrators are actually known to the victims of the assault. Yeah.
This campaign that the police, well, I mentioned earlier that the police launched, right, is they want to tackle specifically in public, well, not specifically, but they want to get people to report bystanders to report such acts, right? Is AWARE seeing more people call in to say, like, perhaps I'm in public and this happened to me, besides the cases of people with known perpetrators?
Yeah. I would say it's more about cases where people have had a bit more consideration, because it would often be that in that moment, it's hard to really decide whether you want to spot it and report it immediately. So whilst the framework is good, I mean, the SPOT campaign says, spot it, protect the victim and yourself, observe the key details, and then tell the police, right? We are not the front desk for the police in that situation, but when they call us, they are really exploring options. We do hear from friends, we do hear from teachers, we do hear from sometimes family members who are calling, and those are usually cases that are less in the public space. Having said that, what I would share is that very often in that moment itself, 2 things can happen to people who are observing the situation. One is freezing, and then the other is fawning. Because when something bad happens, especially in a public space, the first thing that we do is we freeze. We will be checking ourselves, questioning, are we seeing what we are seeing? Is this really happening right in front of my eyes? And as a result, what do I do about it? And people would struggle. So whilst SPOT is a good framework, we need to also take into account the fact that for many people, we're not equipped to really go through that framework without some additional training and awareness building.
So I will get into people who have been what do I call it? I really don't want to call them victims, but people who have been affected by these things in public. But I just want to quickly get into, are there any misconceptions we might have about who might be a victim?
Oftentimes there are, of course, perceptions or stereotypes. So victims, they would think that the victims are women and the perpetrators are men. And maybe just using the word victim still, because in the moment when it's happening, we do call them the victims. But what we also want to try and acknowledge is that after the event, we refer to them as survivors, which is a more helpful frame of reference as well. So we tend to think of the victims as being women, the perpetrators as being men. Of course, it can be the other way around too, where you have victims being the men and perpetrators being the women. Although again, that has its own stereotypes and people would be doubting that a woman could be a perpetrator. We can explore that too in more details.
Okay, and speaking of the perpetrator, this is what Dr. Julia is here for. We want to know, I think people watching will want to know, who are the type of people who molest or take upskirt videos in public? Is there a particular stereotype? Can we pick them out? Out of a bunch of 10 people, can we pick these type of people out? Is it possible?
I would say from my experience, it's all walks of life, so the age as well. So it can be teenage up to, say, in their mid-50s. So they commit the offense for whatever reason. Some may be the younger one due to curiosity. Older one maybe is just a way of maladaptive coping. So they use taking upskirt, molest to cope with the stress in life.
And in recent years, when you work with perpetrators, is there a particular profile, or have they changed over the years? Are these people getting younger, or repeat offenders perhaps?
I would say it's quite consistent in the individual I assess, because they usually get referred by the lawyer. So that one filter one step already. So those who came to me actually may not be very bad people, very bad, straight to jail already. Yeah, so those who came to me usually may have some underlying psychological issue, different kind of stressor at life, at home, in school, social life. So typically the personality would be very introverted. And most of them, I would say majority, have a long history of pornography use. Yeah, so while they are watching porn, there could be some voyeuristic element. And then there are even websites teaching you how to take upskirt.
Okay. Well, lots of thoughts about that. But okay, let's get into it. So what drives the compulsion? What are the acts of voyeurism and molest in public really about? Why do they want to do this to other people in public?
Opportunities. So I saw one young man every morning when he woke up, he would be thinking where to go today. So Dhoby Ghaut is a good place, Plaza Singapura, because there are plenty of opportunities, plenty of escalator as well. For some, it is a way to release the stress. So there is an element of thrill, adrenaline rush as well. So at the moment when they are doing it, they may feel a sense of achievement. So they want to see whether, which angle, if I place my phone, I will have a high chance of success. Yeah, but for some, even though after they took the upskirt, they may not rewatch it. Yeah, so they just forgot about it. And then next time when they engage in the behavior, it's very much automatic, became autopilot.
But what actually pushes someone across the line? Because there are people who, will think about it. They will sit at home and then they'll realize, no, I cannot do this to someone else in public. I cannot do this to a stranger that I don't know. So what is the line where people will be like, no, I'm going to go out today and do this?
Most of them sometimes will have an internal struggle. So as if there is a voice telling, please don't do it. And then another voice countering you, say, go ahead, do it. So there would be some internal struggle. So for those who like watching porn, then they want to experiment. They want to film their own footages or video. So they just want to try whether it will be successful.
And you spoke about them they're stressed about stuff, or they are in their own space and stuff. Why can't they go out and do something like join a run club or make friends or find a hobby with other people versus doing this?
I think that would be different, very much about association. So when you associate the first time you took it, and then you feel that sense of thrill, adrenaline rush, and then it became reinforcing. So you will keep going back to that behavior to have the same effect.
And Shoon, I want to bring you into the conversation about this because we were all speaking about this, about the places where people molest or take upskirt videos, right? Because you mentioned that we got a lot of escalators. So to me, it was actually counterintuitive to like, why would people do this in public? Because there are so many people around, and then the chances of you getting caught is like a lot higher anyway. So why would you take the risk?
Yeah, I think that's the counterintuitive part, because in places like this, whether it is the Dhoby Ghaut station, just using that as one example, or on the trains itself, on the buses, on the escalators, in say the elevators, right? These places are basically crowded and they are anonymous. So in a crowded space, it's actually, we refer to this as high access, very easily accessible, and low risk. There's a very good chance that you could get away with it. And let me break that down a little bit more. So when it's crowded, say you are taking an upskirt video, it might just look like, oh, you're just holding your phone and you just happen to get close because you have to all squeeze in, right, to allow more people into the trains or onto into the lift. Then there's also the transient nature. Everybody's moving very quickly from one place to another place. So there's a lot of focus on getting somewhere. And so people are just not necessarily looking left and right. On the buses and on the lifts today, most people are looking down on their phones. So they are not even looking at their environments. And as a result of that, people are not necessarily paying attention. Those are some examples. And on top of that, the anonymity. So when you do see something, you might actually feel that, do I want to intervene? There are so many other people. Surely somebody else saw it. We call this the bystander effect, right? So it may get unreported even though many people have seen it because they are waiting for or expecting someone else to say that. And then finally, there's also that social contract that we have about community spaces and a bit of a mind your own business. You don't really know what's going on, which has been socialized to us from young. So all of these factors combined makes these sort of settings actually very much attractive to perpetrators.
Yeah, because to me as a bystander, right? And if I see something happening, I'm like, is it really happening? So especially with molest, right? When someone is touching someone else, you're like, do they know each other maybe? Or like, do I know if the person is really uncomfortable? How can I tell? Like, so I think there's a bit of gray area that many bystanders would feel like, am I gonna embarrass someone unknowingly? But so how do I reconcile with that if I'm a bystander, Shoon?
When you said reconcile, what do you mean?
As in, how do I actually say, like, stand out and say, like, are you okay? Like, to the person who perhaps could be in trouble, to say, like, hey, do you feel uncomfortable? How do I do that? What does that look like in reality?
Yes. So we try and train people to do this. So at Aware, we have a training program called Active Bystander that is trying to provide some frameworks to help the bystander get skills, right, to actually intervene. First and foremost, identifying the signs of what it could look like, what could...
I think that's the difficult part, right?
Yes, that's right. That's the difficult part of first and foremost understanding what it looks like and also what are some of the myths around this. And then we give them a framework, we call it the 5 Ds. So the 5 Ds are to a direct intervention. So saying something like, are you okay? Or even telling the person, stop that, if you feel very sure of the fact that this is wrong. But there are other ways, because most people worry about that first one, the direct piece. It's like, oh, that's very high risk, right? And I'm not even sure if it's right. So there are other ways that we actually tell bystanders they can actually intervene. So the next 4 Ds are distract. So perhaps creating some sort of diversion, like interrupting it and asking for directions. Which will throw a person off entirely, right? Or drop something so that the person who's trying to do the upskirt video turns and looks away, and then you're actually starting to break that pattern. So that's the first of the 4 other Ds. And then you have delegate, so finding someone else to help, like looking at others and making eye contact with others who might also have noticed this and seeing if we can find
like notice if someone else noticing
Correct.
this.
That's
okay.
I saw it. I'm looking to see if anybody else has seen it. And can I make eye contact with somebody else who I think has seen it, and can both of us confirm? that, and then you can maybe from there delegate that, and also asking transport staff or calling the police or asking somebody else to assist. Particularly sometimes if you feel that you're small and the perpetrator is very much bigger, or as a woman, you might want to see if you can find another guy who can step in. So that's the next one. And then delay. So if you do happen to freeze, because freezing is actually very real possibility for bystanders, making sure that you're able to check in on the victim as well after the fact and provide some support to the victim. That's also still just as important for the survivor of the molestation. And last but not least, you can document. So if you are safe recording what you saw, you don't share it online, please, but it's just recording that and offering the evidence to the victim or the authorities. So those are 4 other Ds, and we call them together 5 Ds that could be used by anyone. So it's being aware of that and being trained to take action.
Well, actually, on the flip side, if I'm the one being molested on the train, and if someone's making me feel uncomfortable and I can't get out of that situation, then how do I get help from someone standing in front of me on the train or in the bus? How do I signal? Like, is there a way that you think that I could do that?
You can by looking up and looking to others. And sometimes you can even try striking a conversation with somebody else. So the same thing with the distract, right? So asking someone for help, like, do you have a tissue paper? Can I borrow some tissue paper from you, right? Even something like that could actually break the perpetrator's actions, because they may go, oh, you're not alone. And they may have an impression you're with somebody else. That's one way that you could intervene for yourself and just interrupt the thing that's happening to you. I would say, however, it's challenging because today so many of us are on our phones all the time. So if you feel that something's happening and you're looking for help, more than half the time, you're likely to see that everybody else is just looking down on their phone. So that's a problem.
That was my thinking about this whole campaign, because they want bystanders to spot, but then actually people are just in their own worlds. And then sometimes you're like spacing out, and then you don't really realize that, hey, actually someone might need help, or if I'm in an uncomfortable situation, I can't like make eye contact with someone to like say, help me, right? So I think that was the thing that I kind of was grappling with. But the other thing I wanted to point out was that there are posters and there are announcements on the train and buses to say, molesting someone is a crime, or taking upskirt pictures is a crime. Dr. Julia, do you think this actually works to deter potential perpetrators?
For those I assess and interview, actually, they didn't pay attention to such announcement and poster. Even when I asked them whether they sort of notice news reporting these kind of cases, the jail sentencing of such offender, they didn't think it will happen to them. So they are aware of CCTV, those who are aware of CCTV, but they didn't think about the consequences, oblivious to the surroundings at all.
But why? Like, are they just really want to do this right now?
Too preoccupied, I would say, too preoccupied. So to take the upskirt, so they didn't pay attention to the environment.
So then how they'll just go ahead and they will not think about what's happening around them, or how do they actually, get to the point where they're like, I'm going to do this. No matter what you tell me, I'm just going to do it.
Some may pause and think. And sometimes I mentioned earlier about the internal struggle, and then they said, okay, the urge to do it is stronger than their ability to suppress the behavior. So they will just, okay, go ahead, I will do it.
And then
they may not be identified, so another success, which is reinforcing until the next time they will repeat the same behavior.
But it's very interesting to me because people have been caught and then they still reoffend. So there was a case in Singapore where there was a serial upskirter who was jailed 5 years in a row. And I think his name is so famous now, you can find his name, or infamous, and he's on Reddit and his name comes up kind of thing. What is going on there? Like, he went to jail, he knows this is wrong, but he still reoffends.
They forgot. I would say they forgot the negative consequences.
Oh, does their urge, take over the fact?
And also it was a familiar way to cope. So it's very familiar. So every time when they become stressful, life become too stressful, they will sort of go back to the familiar way to cope with stressor.
Is there any way to get get them help?
There is one program at We Care Community Services. It's called No COSO, Non-Contact Sexual Offending Program. So it's a series of sessions that will teach them how to refrain from such behavior. Usually will be involved like having new friends, having new hobbies. So you will be distracted from engaging in upskirting behavior again.
Okay. There are people who think that conservative attitudes in society regarding sexual topics and issues actually contribute to deviant behavior. Shoon, do you agree with this?
Yeah. The thing is, when somebody decides to do something like take an upskirt video or molest somebody, right? That is what we are seeing, the tip of that iceberg, the behavior. Underneath that is a lot of socialization that has happened from a young age around what is body autonomy, around things like gender norms, around consent, and around the concept of, say, objectification of women. So Dr. Lam talked about, for example, porn, right? And there is also lots of media out there now today, and even recently on YouTube, I think we've seen that AI is producing all of this slop that is actually very concerning, and they look like harmless cartoons, but they are not. And so people are watching all of this and getting the wrong concepts around what is acceptable and not acceptable, what is respectful and what is dignified behaviors. So if you are being socialized in this way, naturally you get to a point where you feel like a woman, for example, if I'm just using that as the typical person who might be a target, a woman is just somebody for you to objectify and be allowed to do this too. And there's also concepts, therefore, of oppression, etc. For society, oftentimes as well, women who then want to report this, they feel like they can get victim blamed. Why do you wear a skirt if you know that there's going to be people taking upskirt video of you, right? As an example, or if we even consider the idea of having gendered carriages, like in Japan they have that, but that kind of shifts the problem. It's like getting all the women to squeeze into a crowded women's carriages, but then the perpetrators just go to some other carriages, like mixed gender carriages, and then if you as a woman are in a mixed gender carriage and you get molested or an upskirt video is taken, they may say, well, but you had the women's carriage to go into. So there is all of this that reinforces and makes it really, really difficult. We're not really addressing the root cause of the issue.
So is there a solution? Like, should we be having healthier conversations about sex so that people don't feel like they have to hide their compulsions or act on it in public?
We should have earlier conversations about what is right and wrong behaviors and at age-appropriate level. So even for somebody who might be a 2 or 3-year-old child, giving them the right concept of, okay, if you today, who should be kissing you and touching you and cuddling you. And if you don't feel like being kissed or cuddled or touched, it's okay. And that they are able to assert that for themselves. As a community, we sometimes don't necessarily do that very well. It starts from as young as that, to give everybody that confidence. Otherwise, we are always doubting, was that an accidental touch, for example?
I was attending a conference last week, so it's invisible disability and the law. So there is one group of individuals, they are more vulnerable. So those with like ASD, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, low IQ. So sometimes they are also the perpetrator because they sort of the social boundary are bit blurred. They want to make friends, but they don't know how. And then they may be on the train like a certain girl, a stranger. And then they like take video of them, not necessarily upskirt, but just video of that girl that they are like fond of.
So they make someone uncomfortable, but they are not sure how to go about doing it.
They want to make friends, but they don't know like the steps to make friends.
I want to build on what Shoon said. Like, Dr. Julia, do you agree that we should be having better conversations about sex so that we help people like the perpetrators that you work
Okay,
with?
so we are talking about like good touch and bad touch. So what is a good touch? What is a bad touch? So if he is a stranger, it may not be a good idea to just anyhow touch. So I think it start as early as possible in school. So many years ago, I was also thinking of maybe going around school to like give talks about this upskirt behavior so as to stop some teenager from beginning the behavior. I think that will help.
Have you worked in cases where, what's the youngest case perpetrator you've worked with actually?
16.
And what were some of the things he or she was
he was
boy?
a bit high functioning autism. So he has like Asperger's syndrome, so some social skill deficit and doesn't know how to make friends but want to have a girlfriend.
And then he acted out in public.
He acted out, but he like anyhow take it very blur, of course not professional at all. So he didn't capture anything, but I think somebody caught him.
I mean, Shoon, when Aware works with people who have been recorded or groped against their will, you know, what does accountability look like in those situations? Like, is it about getting the perpetrator like punished legally, or do they want like other forms of justice?
Yeah. We work on empowering the survivor, because in this case, they have become the survivor of an incident. And the first thing to do is equipping them with information and validating and affirming them, because so often survivors question themselves, and also people will question them. So if I was touched on the bus, right, people may actually ask you, are you sure? Maybe that was just accidental, the bus jerked and then the person bumped into you, right? So that's always been the typical kind of first response. People don't straight away say, okay, I hear you, you've been touched. Instead, they ask that sort of questions that makes you wonder if you're being too sensitive. So the first thing we do is we want to affirm them, and we want to acknowledge their experience and not have them feel like they're second-guessing themselves. And that's often what victims and survivors want first and foremost, that validation of their experience. The second thing then is providing them with information about what they can do, what are their options. When we talk about justice, we talk about it from a kaleidoscopic perspective, and there are 6 aspects. So consequence is one of them, and that is where reporting to the police and then having that lead to an investigation and subsequently legal consequences. That's one aspect. But there are many other aspects. So the recognition piece, the dignity, giving them back their dignity, letting them have their voice, talking about prevention and also about connectedness, because something like this can also make them become very isolated. And different survivors will want different things. For some, getting the consequences, the legal consequences happen to the perpetrator may give them the satisfaction, and for others, it may not give them that satisfaction. Particularly if in so doing, they feel like they've lost their voice or that they have become disconnected, because people may ostracize them for reporting. And so it's really important that we understand what are the needs of the survivors as well.
You may, I mean, I have to say kudos to the Singapore Police Force for spotlighting this and making people more vigilant, right? But Dr. Julia, as you said, you don't think that these campaigns always work, or the announcements and the posters and stuff, they don't always work for people who are going to commit these crimes anyway. What do you think will actually work?
I think it would be psychoeducation, public education. So before they are arrested, so the information get across to them that they can think more seriously about the consequences. So if they are still in school, maybe something in school, I'm also referring to the higher institution as well. So maybe some talks about the topic delivered by SPF, so that the student, and particularly the male student, become more aware of their own behavior. So actually, we are talking about you. So if you have similar issue, maybe you can seek help from your school counseling unit, that kind of stuff. So it's more like prevention before they are arrested.
Shoon, do you agree?
I would say that plus a few other things, because it would take a whole community. To that point about if people are not looking up and looking around, it just creates even more of a low-risk environment. So how do we all equip ourselves to be active bystanders who are looking around and ensuring that there is safety for everyone? I would like to think of it as, can we strengthen the kampong spirit, right, around us, and have the courage and the confidence to intervene and help one another? That feels like it's been more diluted nowadays with mobile devices, everybody being busy or just spaced out on their ways home or to work. If we are able to give everyone that ability to feel like it's okay to be kepo in this way, and have the skills to understand how to look at intervening, it will create an environment that makes it harder for perpetrators.
And Dr. Julia, you want to say something?
I think as a forensic psychologist, I hold a different view. So most of the voyeurs who came to me, actually, they are not bad people. They are people struggling. So they are just having a very maladaptive coping mechanism to deal with their stress. So if they are arrested that way, actually is a very serious consequences. So maybe even mandatory jail. So I just feel they could be helped before they go to that stage.
So actually, if I'm someone who has like these thoughts in my head and I'm watching this, and then how do I know that maybe I should get help right now? Like, this is not really like normal thoughts that people have.
Maybe like some roadshow, so you have some, I don't know, community center, so you talk about this upskirt behavior. So there are sure a lot of hidden voyeur in the community. So if they sort of being informed that actually it is a treatable condition, then they may come forward to seek treatment.
Maybe I'll just build a little bit and clarify as well, because by saying the active bystanders, given that we talk about 5 Ds, only one of which is to document, but there's others. So even something like distracting could help disrupt a perpetrator from committing the act, and that I'm not sure whether that could help with just interrupting the thought process.
Yeah, they will be very engrossed.
But if, let's say, I saw it and then I went up and asked for directions, or asked the person who's shooting the upskirt, or asked the person who is being shot, the upskirt, about directions, immediately I'm breaking that dynamic. So I don't necessarily am going to report yet, but by disturbing that, what is happening through distraction, that's one technique I feel that could at least reduce the harm to the person who is the victim, but also interrupt the action of the perpetrator without necessarily leading to reporting yet.
Yeah. So I thank you both for sharing your both points of view about it, and hopefully the viewers will have something to take away from it. So thank you for that. And that's it from The Usual Place today. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss new episodes of the podcast. And if you have thoughts on what we discussed, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I'll see you next Thursday.